Hello, everybody. Welcome to Angloville's second webinar. We're going to get started in just a few minutes' time, in 3 or 4 minutes from now. So in the meantime, go and get yourself a glass of water, a cup of tea, and we'll start any minute now. We're just waiting for some new people to join us. Whilst you're waiting to get started, if you'd like to join us in the chat window, you can see on the right-hand side of your screen. If you can't see the chat window, then just click on the title of the YouTube video, and it will take you to the YouTube channel, and then you'll see the chat window on the right-hand side. So feel free to get involved, send us a little message, and we'll be happy to read out as many contributions as we can during the webinar. If you've just joined us, this is Angloville's second ever live webinar. Welcome. We're going to start in maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, so if you would like to write anything in the chat window to introduce yourself, you're welcome to. Otherwise, we will get started in about 2 minutes. Welcome, Adam. Thank you for sending us a message. We'll get started in just a minute or two. If you cannot see a place to write comments, all you need to do is click on the title of this video on YouTube, and it will take you straight to our YouTube channel, where you'll be able to join in the chat and leave us comments throughout our webinar. Hi, editor. Thank you for joining us. And Krzysztof and Magdalena, thank you for being here as well. If you haven't introduced yourself in the chat, then please feel free to do so. We're going to start in just 1 minute now. Welcome, Ivona. Thank you for joining us. We're going to start any moment now. And Jan as well. Thank you, Jan, for being here. Welcome to our webinar. And Marlena as well. Welcome. Okay. I think we will begin. There may be still some people who are joining us. So I will start to introduce myself first. My name is Chris, and I am the Native Speaker Coordinator Manager at Angloville. And I am now introducing to you the second ever Angloville webinar live from our Angloville head office. So it's a very exciting time for us. If you joined us for our previous webinar about Easter, then thank you for coming back for a second time. If not, you can find it on our Facebook page, so please go and check it out. Today, the topic that we're going to be talking about is spring. You hopefully, in the parts of the world where you're living, you've noticed that the weather is getting a little bit better, the sun is shining, and many different things about the season are starting to take effect, which is really nice. And today we're going to talk about some British English and American English vocabulary and idioms related to spring. Some of them you may have heard before and you may be familiar with, and some may be new to you. So your challenge is to see which ones you can identify Maybe you can send us a message in the chat to let us know that something is new to you or something is familiar to you. And over the next couple of weeks during the lovely spring season, maybe you can use this new vocabulary with your friends, your colleagues, and your family. Okay? So let's begin. We'll start with some idioms, which are, of course, incredibly difficult things to learn in English. And the first one we will use uses the word spring, and the idiom is to spring into action. Spring into action. And what I'm going to do when I introduce some new vocabulary to you, I'm going to paste it into the chat window like I've just done, so you can see the spelling and the formation of the phrase or the idiom. Remember, if you can't see the chat window, just click on the title of the video and it will take you to our YouTube channel. So to spring into action is to begin doing something or to become active suddenly and very quickly, to spring into action. So for example, a sentence that you could use is that firefighters need to be able to spring into action at a moment's notice. That means they need to be ready to do something, to go and put out a fire and be available with no notice. Okay, so they spring into action. That's a really nice and very common idiom used in the English language. Maybe you've heard about it before. The next idiom that we're going to look at is the idiom no spring chicken. No spring chicken. We very, very often use this idiom in the negative form. We can use it as just spring chicken, but no spring chicken, which I've now pasted for you into the chat window, is the most common way of expressing this idiom. It's usually used to describe someone who is no longer very young, probably someone who is past young adulthood and sometimes doesn't quite realize it and tries to look and act younger than their age. So, for example, you could use a sentence such as, I don't know how old Mike is, but obviously he's no spring chicken. So that's a really nice and very common idiom used in the English language. There is a bit of an ongoing challenge for everybody here. If you feel like either of the two idioms that we've introduced so far, you would be able to use in your own sentence, please feel free to write it in the chat and we will try and read some of them out as we go. The next idiom then that I will introduce to you is a spring in someone's step. So we could say a spring in my step, a spring in your step, but a spring in someone's step. This is a really, really lovely idiom, one that I really like. If you walk with or have a spring in your step, you walk very energetically in a way that shows that you're feeling happy and confident about something. So for example, you could say a sentence such as, there's been a definite spring in his step ever since he met Joanna. So in this case, the suggestion by this idiom is that a person has met a new partner or new friend and it's given them a new lease of life, a new thing to feel really positive about. And so they are walking around with a spring in their step. Okay, so that's a really nice and also very, very common English idiom related to the word spring. The next one that is also super common and really, really nice is to spring to mind. To spring to mind, that word spring being used very commonly in the world of idioms. To spring to mind just simply means to come quickly into your mind, to think about something very quickly. So, for example, if I say the word Australia, a vision of beaches and blue seas may immediately spring to mind. Something that just instantly comes to your head when you think about something. So in this case, Australia. So that's a really, really nice phrase as well. Remember, if you are able to, you're welcome to leave us a suggestion for how you could use some of these idioms in a sentence of your own. They will stay in the chat window. So if a little bit later you'd like to write them down and Google them and practice them, then you're very welcome to do so. The next idiom we'll look at is the idiom to spring to life. To spring to life. That means to become suddenly active or suddenly busy. So for example, you could say something like, after about 8 o'clock, the city springs to life. And the suggestion there would be that you're in a place that's quite quiet in the daytime, but in the evenings, it really comes alive and becomes very energetic and busy. So the city springs to life. Again, it's super, super common every native English speaker around will understand that phrase very, very comfortably. Another similar kind of idiom is to spring out of something. Okay, so to spring out of something is to issue forth from something in a constant gush or stream. Okay, so for example, oil began springing out of the spot where my pickaxe struck the ground. So oil began springing out, the idea that it springs very, very quickly out of a place. Once again, I'll paste the text into the chat window for you. One more, the final idiom that I'm going to share with you today is a really, really nice one, and one that it would be lovely for you to be able to use with your friends and colleagues. I'll paste it right now. It's full of the joys of spring. Full of the joys of spring. This is an idiom that just means to be very, very happy. So, for example, I could say the sentence, he bounced into the office full of the joys of spring. And the suggestion there is that spring is a lovely time of year based on new life and new energy. And if somebody is full of the joys of spring, then they're really, really positive and happy. So they are the idioms that I'm going to share with you today. Remember, you can join in as well. So if you'd like to share any sentences of your own using some of those idioms, please feel free. And if you can think of any other idioms that you know about spring, then please feel free to share them with us as well. Also, if you have a particular favorite from the ones we've shared already, please share it with us and let us know if you've been able to use it yourself. Okay, we'll move on very, very slightly now and look at some more simple spring-related vocabulary. So not idioms, but just individual words that are also related to spring that may be really useful at this time of the year. And some of them will be very familiar, but there may also be some that are a little bit new to you. So the first one is a really nice word, and it's the word bask. I will paste it again so you can have the correct spelling. The word bask is a lovely word. Bask means to lie exposed to warmth and light, typically from the sun, for relaxation and pleasure. So, for example, we could see seals on the rocks basking in the sun. Now, as I said right at the very beginning of this webinar, the sun is certainly shining where I live at the moment, so I hope it is for you too. And it's very, very possible to see many, many people outside basking and enjoying the sunshine. So the word bask is really, really nice in relation to being outside in the sun. Another really, really nice word that is very, very common at this time of the year is the word blooming, or the infinitive form to bloom. And if something blooms or is blooming, it just means that it's producing flower or to be in flower. So, of course, at this time of the year, there are many, many new flowers blooming. So the blooming period is in the spring, would be a nice example sentence. And so you'll see around the towns and cities and villages where you live, I'm sure many, many new flowers and plants are blooming at the moment. A very, very similar word, but still different and has a different meaning, is the word blossoming. The word blossoming is a really, really nice word. So when a tree or plant blossoms, it produces flowers before producing fruit that can be eaten. So you'll see many trees in particular where there are little flowers at the end of the leaves. So for example, the cherry tree is beginning to blossom. Cherry trees are a really, really nice example of trees that blossom. I've got a quick question here. Can you repeat, please, what does it mean to spring out of something? Yes, of course. So to spring out of something is when usually related to a liquid, let's say some water or some oil, when it very, very quickly is ejected from a place. So let's imagine a different example. If we had a dam of, let's say, wood or some concrete walls protecting some water from the other side, and all of a sudden there was a leak or a hole in the wall or in the dam, then all of a sudden the water might spring out and very, very quickly be ejected through the dam or through the wood in a way that was not intended potentially. So to spring out of something is to very, very quickly be ejected, and it's usually in these examples related to liquids, but not always. Okay, let's look at a couple more examples of vocabulary then. One of them that I also really like is the word breezy. Breezy is a really nice word. Breezy is in relation to weather, and of course, because I'm British, we speak about the weather an awful lot. So breezy is a wind that is quite strong, but still quite pleasant. So it's a really good if you like to go outside and get a little bit of fresh air. If there is a nice breeze, then the wind is breezy. So for example, it was a breezy day, just right for sailing. Okay, so for certain sports like sailing, for example, a bit of a breeze and having breezy weather is actually very, very useful. Okay. Another really, really nice sound that you may hear during the course of the springtime is the sound of a buzz. A buzz is the sound that a bee would make, or a wasp, but bees are very, very nice, I think. So the sound that bees make in the spring. So I can hear something buzzing would be a nice way of using that in a sentence. I can hear something buzzing, probably a bee. Okay. The next word that I'm going to introduce us to today is the word daffodil. Daffodil is a really, really nice word. Again, you may have come across this before, but a daffodil is a really lovely yellow bell-shaped flower with a long green stem that's very, very commonly seen in the spring. Where I grew up in the UK, for example, there were many, many, many daffodils at this time of the year growing in the local park. And also an interesting fact related to the daffodil. As you may be aware, I'm from the UK, and the UK is made up of 4 different countries, which are England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And the daffodil is actually the national flower of Wales. So for all of our Welsh friends and colleagues, the daffodil is a symbol of their country. So a very, very important time of year for the daffodil in Wales, for sure. Also, being British, I'll go back to using some weather-based vocabulary. And this is another word that is really nice. It's the word drizzle. The word drizzle. A little bit of a tough sound with a double Z in the middle of the word there. The word drizzle is referring to very light drops of rain, small quantities of light drops of rain. So it was only drizzle, so I didn't need an umbrella. So the idea that there is not so much rain that it is unpleasant, but maybe a little bit annoying. And where I grew up in the UK, I grew up in a city called Manchester, which is very, very famous for 2 things, for its football teams and its drizzle. Okay, just a few more bits of vocabulary to go through before we come to the end of today's webinar. The next word that I will use is the word grassy. Grassy is a really nice word too. Very simple, very descriptive. The word grassy just means to be covered in grass. There is lots of nice, fresh, green grass at this time of the year in the spring. So, for example, we could say, only a small area was affordable and is used to line the grassy courtyard. So we can use the word grassy to describe areas, fields, patches of land that are covered in nice green grass. So that's a really nice word too. Okay, one more word that I will use is the word hatch. The word hatch. If you joined us for our last webinar about Easter, then we use the word hatch many times during that conversation. The word hatch very simply means for an egg, in this case, to break in order to allow a young animal to come out. So, for example, when the chicks hatch out, they are small and defenseless. Okay, so there are many different animals that hatch from eggs, and a chick is very, very famous for at this time of the year for hatching from eggs. We have a very lovely contribution in the chat. You can have a little look for yourself. I will try and read it out without making any errors. It's a really nice contribution using some of the idioms we looked at earlier. I am no spring chicken anymore, but it sprang to my mind that I have to spring into action and start exercising on a spring mattress close to a spring. Wow, that's really amazing. That's very, very good. You must be a native speaker of English. That's a really, really great way of combining many, many different idioms very accurately. Well done. That's very impressive. Thank you for contributing. If anybody else thinks that they can use some idioms successfully, then please, please, please feel free to type in the chat window. Remember, if you can't see it, just click the name of the video and it will take you to our YouTube channel. Okay, just a few more final examples of spring-related vocabulary then. Another one, which if you're not sure what this flower looks like, it's called a snowdrop. Go and have a little look later on Google Images, perhaps, if you are not sure what it looks like. It's a really, really nice flower, famous at this time of the year, that produces small, white, and bell-shaped flowers in the early spring. So there is a really nice expression. I will be back before the first snowdrops of spring, because snowdrops are a flower that is really, really related to this time of year. People can say, we'll be back before the first snowdrops of spring. So that's really nice too. Okay, just one more, I think, that I really like. And it's an example of something I've been doing a little bit of myself recently, maybe not as much as I should have done, but is the phrase spring cleaning. Spring cleaning. Many of us are at the moment working from home and have a little bit more time around our houses. And spring cleaning is something maybe all of us could be doing some of, which is the act of cleaning all of a place, especially your house, very well, including parts you don't often clean. So spring cleaning is a type of deep cleaning where you clean at the back of the sofa, in the bottom of kitchen cupboards, the places that, let's be honest, when you're cleaning at the end of the week, we don't always find time to get round to. So spring cleaning is the idea of really, really deep cleaning a place. And perhaps that's something you've been doing something with recently yourself. Okay, so we've introduced an awful lot of idioms and an awful lot of other vocabulary today during this session. And we are very close to the end of today's webinar. But before we go, there is an opportunity for a short question and answer session. If anybody has a question they would like to ask in relation to spring, or vocabulary or idioms related to spring, then feel free to type it into the chat window. And if you would like, now is also another opportunity to try and use some of those vocabulary or idioms in a sentence, and we will try and read some out just before we finish. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to write something, to type something. Welcome, Agatha. Don't worry about being late. There's no problem. You can always catch up on the full webinar later. Is there any difference between blooming and blossoming? That's a good question. There is a difference, but the difference is a little bit subtle. It's only small. Blooming is something that we would use to describe a flower developing. Okay, so a flower like a daffodil, for example. So if a daffodil is blooming, it is just growing in the beginning of spring. Blossoming is in relation to the same process, but for the small, colorful flowers at the end of a bigger plant or tree. So, for example, if you have a big tree where the tree is around for the entire year, for example, but just in the springtime, the small, colorful flowers appear, they are blossoming. So it's a slightly different piece of vocabulary, but it's very, very similar. We have another question. Can we say that someone looks blooming? Yeah, we can use the word blooming in relation to people. We would probably say someone is blooming. So, for example, if somebody walks into a room and you feel that they look full of energy and full of life and they look very healthy, you'd say, wow, you look absolutely blooming today. And that, yes, absolutely would be a really nice way of describing somebody. If you have any more questions you'd like to ask, or if you'd like to practice using some of the vocabulary or idioms in a sentence, then please feel free to do so. It's an interesting question. Something that may happen in spring. I think it's probably something that can happen in many, many different seasons. I'm not sure what the answer is to your question, I'll be honest. It's difficult to manage the class once spring fever kicks in. Once spring fever kicks in. So spring fever is a really nice idiom that we haven't covered today. Spring fever. I wonder, Marlena, would you be able to give everybody a brief definition of what spring fever means? That would be really interesting. See if you could describe it for us. Spring love. Yes, okay, spring love in relation to Anya's question, I believe. Spring love. Thank you, Katarzyna. I think then final opportunities to type in your questions or your comments or have a little practice of using some of the vocabulary just before we finish. So I'll give you one more minute to type anything you'd like to, and we'll try and get a couple more contributions before we finish. Spring break. Yeah, yes, absolutely. Spring break is a really, really famous tradition, really, in the USA in particular. The idea spring break, that time where lots of university, college students go away for a week or two and party and relax before returning to their studies. Spring break. So yeah, you'll see in many American TV shows and movies the term spring break is used very frequently. Yeah, absolutely. That's a nice one. Thank you. And when is spring break? Spring break is, I think, as I say, I'm from the UK, and it's an American tradition generally, but I think it's around the kind of Easter time, so sort of March, April, when some universities and colleges in the US are closed. Um, to spring to life, yes, to spring to life is a really nice expression, a nice idiom. To spring to life, if something just very, very suddenly becomes awake and alive, like a city we talked about before, springing to life in the evenings when it might have been quite quiet in the daytime. Okay, well, I think what we will do is we will end today's webinar at this point. Thank you very, very much for joining us. I really hope that you were able to enjoy some of the vocabulary and the idioms that we shared. Please do try and use those with your friends, your family, and your colleagues over the next few weeks during the lovely spring sunshine. Hopefully, it is a sunny where you are. If you would like to join us in the future for more webinars, we will be holding plenty more, then you can visit the link that I'm about to write for you in the chat window right now. So please head over to that website and you'll find all the information you need. Just keep checking back, and the information about the next webinars that we will be doing on a regular basis will be posted there. So please feel free to join us again. So thank you so much for your time. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will see you at another webinar soon. Thank you so much.